Bom, gente, bom dia. É um prazer tê-los aqui conosco nesse dia importante para a gente aqui, na continuidade do programa Transformando Juntos. Hoje é um dia bastante importante, porque a gente vai receber aulas muito inovadoras e muito estimulantes e que vão contribuir para o nosso desenvolvimento do Transformando Juntos aqui no Litoral Norte. Quero agradecer muito a presença de vocês, dizer que é uma alegria estar com vocês mais uma vez, e também dizer que a gente aqui, ao longo do dia, teremos alguns movimentos, teremos um trabalho que vai ser feito também no segundo andar, mas aí, ao longo dos momentos, a gente vai comunicando em vocês e vai organizando as turmas para que fiquem uma parte aqui e uma parte fique lá no piso superior. Quero pedir que a doutora N, que está aqui conosco, e a Márcia falem um bom dia. Acho que a Márcia primeiro, né, na ordem, porque depois a doutora N já introduz o trabalho do dia. Tá bem? Então, bom dia a todos. E eu quero agradecer de antemão à secretária de Educação, que nos cedeu esse espaço, gentilmente. Muito obrigada, Márcia, em nome da secretaria. E a gente está muito bem acomodado aqui. Obrigada.
Olá, bom dia a todos. É uma alegria tê-los aqui, uma alegria muito grande participar desse momento. A gente tem uma equipe também da educação que está muito feliz em participar dessas discussões. Pode ter certeza que nós estamos aprendendo muito. Só gostaria mesmo de dar as boas-vindas. Afinal de contas, vocês estão na minha casa, então eu achei importante passar aqui para dar as boas-vindas e desejar que nós tenhamos um excelente dia. E me colocar à disposição para qualquer coisa que vocês precisem. Então, um excelente dia e muito obrigada.
Olá, bom dia a todos. Me alegria participar hoje. So, may I introduce my team? So Mandy, and Victoria, and Peter. And we are delighted to be working with you and to be continuing the very productive conversations from yesterday and beginning to unpack and explore some of the issues and ideas that came up in conversations. We are delighted that there is a filming of today, but we also want you to understand that when we are in discussions in small groups, it is a safe space and conversation, that very personal views and emotions and feelings will not be part of the final film. So, safe space for you all. Upstairs, we will be offering a parallel discussion around information, and the maximum number of people we will have is about 20. So when we're breaking to split into the two groups, we will ask you to identify who wants to be part of the information conversation upstairs. Okay? So thank you.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you. Obrigada, Márcia. Obrigada, Márcia. E então agora a gente começa o dia com a Vitória, que vai nos apresentar a primeira palestra da manhã. Vitória, por favor.
Obrigada, bom dia. And I'm very happy to welcome all of you again today for another exciting interactive discussion about what integrated care is and how to take it forward. So before I'm going to tell you something, we actually want to know something from you. And I hope everyone has a couple of Post-its. Who does not? Everybody got some? There should be some lying around still. Yes. What I would like you to do now is write down on a couple of them, 2, 3, 4, however many, what does integrated care mean for you, and what are the key elements? So what keywords, key elements do you associate with integrated care? If somebody asks you, what is integrated care? How would you explain that? What would be the key tools or instruments or keywords that you would use to explain integrated care? Okay? And use one post-it per idea or per word, please. Okay, have you had some inspiration? Had some ideas? We heard a lot of those key elements, and we heard a lot of those tools and instruments yesterday. And many of you are already putting all those different elements together to make it one big model of care. So, wrong way. What we've seen yesterday, and this beautiful panel that was drawn yesterday, comprising the summary, the synthesis of everything that you're doing and everything that integrated care means for and in Litoral Norte, that also depicts a pathway, a model of integrated care, all those different bits and pieces that we need to put together. And over the last 20 years, research, experiences, good practices from around the world have tried to figure out what are those key elements, what are the basic things that everyone in any kind of project for integrated care needs to look at in order to move forward, to transform your local system and to transform the services and the neighborhoods and communities that you work with. And so there are a plethora, there are many, many different frameworks and models out there. Some of them with just 5 very high-level elements. Some of them actually have 84 items, very, very detailed. But when you look at all of them and synthesize them, you can usually pull them down into 8 elements. And I want to talk a bit more about those 8 elements that you need to look at and that you need to try and put together with your communities in order to move forward. So what do you think what the first one would be? Any ideas? What's the first thing that I will say? Larissa, what did you say?
Comunicação.
Okay, and any other ideas? You can shout out in Portuguese as well.
Relações confiáveis.
So, trust. Okay, let's see. My first one was people-centered. And that's, of course, and we saw that yesterday. It's not about the disease. It's not about a problem. It's about the people and the families, the communities that you work with and that you work in. So people-centered needs to be at the core of anything you think about. And when you look at definitions for integrated care, and there's also many definitions out there, they will all say that you need to transform your system, you need to transform your services to become people-centered. Unfortunately, very often, that is only paid lip service to, which means, yes, we have it in our mission, we have it in our vision, but we don't actually engage with the people. We don't actually go out and ask them, what is it that you want? What is it that you need? And how can we serve you better? But also, how can you get more involved in your local neighborhood, in your community? So people-centered is really something that I honestly also think you've figured out much better than we have in Europe. Listening to the stories yesterday, really going out and listening to the people, listening to the communities. What is it that we can help you with so that you lead a better, more fulfilled and healthier life. Now, the order is absolutely random. It's just my storyline. You can draw your own storyline, but the next one, which is linked to people-centered, is of course community involvement. And community involvement is just the next step from people-centered. So if we say people-centered, that's the individual basis, then community involvement is how do I actually get my neighborhood to participate. And it's also, we've had a really lovely discussion yesterday over dinner. How do we actually support, for example, family caregivers? People who care for their older or for children with disabilities, neighbors who come and help out. All those volunteers, all those people who support others out of kindness and out of solidarity, how can we support them? Because what we know also from literature is if you're a caregiver, you have a much higher risk of getting sick yourself because of the stress, but also it reduces usually your income because you need to reduce your workload, and it's usually women. But that's just a side note. So community involvement is also how do we actually link the communities among themselves? How do we actually support better exchange among each other? And how do we support volunteers, families to support each other so that they actually don't even have to go to a service or go into hospital, that they know how to deal with it themselves. But also, and we heard that in the conversations, how do we educate them to know which services to go to when they actually need them? So it's a lot around also health literacy and education for the community to understand what is out there, how can I support myself, but also where do I get support when I need it. And peer support, especially when we talk about young people, children, is the best support that you can give them because they listen to their peers. And we heard that yesterday also from, how do you pronounce it in Brazilian? Rolezinho. It's the kids themselves that actually do something and go out there and say, look, we want you to lead a healthy life. I think that's cool. And they have the language to also talk with each other in a different way. So the next element that always comes up is competencies. We don't educate and train our workforce properly to collaborate with each other. And we all know that, and it doesn't matter, every country is the same. You have a school for physical therapy, you have a school for psychology, you have a medical school, you have a nursing school. They don't interact. And if the students don't interact and learn together, how should they then later, going out into the workforce, know how to communicate and work with each other? They often don't even know what the other professionals are allowed to do and what their training teaches them. I have had some conversations where doctors had no idea what social workers were actually allowed to do and what their training looked like. So when we talk about competencies, we first of all, of course, need to think about how do we educate and train our workforce. But we all know universities and schools and the education system is even more difficult to change than the health system. So that takes a long, long time. So we also need to think about continuous education in our workplace. And part of your integrated care initiatives needs to be thoughts around how do we train our staff together. And we heard some workshops are being also conducted, for example, in Ubatuba, that are interdisciplinary, where everybody learns what does it mean when I fill out a form, what are the technical terms that we use, but also why do we need to work together? How do we use technology together? When should I call? How can we also conduct, for example, a home visit together, a social worker and a nurse? These are all things that many need to learn because it doesn't come natural. If it would be natural, we wouldn't be sitting here today. Another element that always comes up in literature is then, of course, if we have the workforce in place, we need to have the processes in place as well. So care transitions, processes, how do organizations work together? How do sectors work together? Are they allowed to work together? There are countries where the hospital is not allowed legally to share data with the social sector. So these are all issues that you need to look at when we talk about care transitions. It's of course also people end up in the emergency department. People end up in hospital. How do they ever get out again? So, and that's where Scotland has a really nice model developed where it's very well defined. When do we sign some, or when do we refer someone into hospital? But how, very crucially, do we get him out again, or her? How do we get them back into the community and give them the support at home so they can stay at home and be cared for by their loved ones, and if necessary also by professionals who come and visit them at home. So this is a very technical but also crucial element that needs to be put in place. This also means being very clear about the roles and responsibilities. What is my role as part of this process and as part of this team? And what is my responsibility? And also being clear about it, what are the roles and responsibilities of everyone else. In Santa Casa with the nurses, we had a really interesting discussion because I asked them, is it actually clear to you what your new coordination role means? And they said, yeah, it's clear to us. But the doctors don't understand it, and everyone else doesn't understand it. So that's also really important to think about. Even if it's clear for me, is it clear for everyone else what my new role means? And you need to communicate that again. So logically, the next step is information flow and data. What data do we need, but also how do we use the data? And that's something that Anne and Peter are going to work on with you more later on. But also, what kind of information do we have and what do we need to pass on? If we say that we connect across organizations and across sectors, somebody else needs to know what we've been doing. And that's very often where information gets lost. Because either we rely on the patients and the families to know exactly what's been happening, or we rely on very unreliable charts that are very often illegible or not complete. So as part of this whole process, you also need to train and be very clear about what kind of information do we need, but also make it very clear that it is your responsibility to fill this in properly, because otherwise others can't do their job. So once we have information and data in place and we know where they flow, how they flow, and who has got them, then the next step is actually to communicate them. This is a very important point, because very often information and communication are used interchangeably. They're not. Information is giving out. At the moment, I'm giving you information. If I'm successful with it, and if I'm good at it, then I'm actually communicating because I'm getting through to you. Communication is always a two-way street. Information is a one-way street. So thinking about, do I actually reach the audience I want to reach? Have they understood? And that's why in communication it's so important also to ask myself, who am I communicating with? What kind of language do I need? Which channels should I need for the communication? but then also going out and asking, did I make myself clear? Did you understand what I was telling you? Or do I need to rephrase it? Do I need a different kind of language? And we very often forget that. Because communication, we think communication is all around us. And within technology, with our phones, it is so easy to communicate nowadays. When actually, and you've said that yesterday also, the most effective communication is still face-to-face. Hello, how are you? Did you get that? And instead of writing 10 emails, one phone call. So finally, there is, of course, another element, and that is governance and accountability. Somewhere, sometime, something has to happen on the senior level and on the system level to support you to do your job locally. This is around regulation, it's around financial flows, it's around resources. And for me, what is really important here is actually the accountability part. Because if I am clear about my roles and responsibilities, and I know I have to provide information, and I need to communicate that, then I'm also accountable. And first and foremost, we're accountable to our communities. But we're also accountable, of course, to our organization and to our managers and to our system. So that is also an element of this learning organization. If I'm accountable, then everybody is also allowed to ask me whether I've followed up, for example, with a patient, or whether I've called my colleague and told them about a problem that's arisen, and things like that. But what is also really very important is systems often get hung up with regulation and new laws and finances, etc. They don't, if you have a law on integrated care, that will not give you an integrated care system. And you can see that in Germany. Germany has had a law on integrated care for the past 15 years, and it's still one of the most fragmented systems in the world. So yes, it can be useful, but it will not give you the delivery on the ground. It will not change the system, because the last element in this story are the cultures and values. And we've heard that yesterday, we felt it yesterday, we experienced it yesterday. Cultures and values, humanity, gratitude, humility, honesty, but also letting it go, letting go of control and giving the permission to others to actually take over some roles and responsibilities, to work together. That's a very different culture than what we're used to. So and also it's really important to know, because we're trained in silos, we come with a professional culture that is different for everyone. My identity is an economist. Mandy's identity is a nurse. And that comes with a professional culture that is very different. So what we need to acknowledge is, yes, we have different training behind us, we have different cultures and experiences behind us. But here, in this room and in this community, we have some core values and a common culture where everybody can contribute with their own culture and values and cultural background. And that is really important, to also be very explicit about it. Because many of the early projects and programs are not around anymore, because they only looked at structures and processes and technology. They never looked at the people involved. And they never looked at the culture. And that's something that Mandy and I will be talking about, how do you change cultures and values, and around the communication and leadership and management of it all. How do we get people to actually change? It's a very difficult question. There's no easy answer to it, but there's some tools and elements that you can implement And actually, you have already started on that, as we heard yesterday as well. So this is a summary, really, of the key elements of integrated care. And you need all of them in place at some point. But you can't tackle all of them at once. So for each and every one of you and your programs, your projects, you need to think about where do we need to start? What are the priorities, really? And they can be very different. But in the end, all of these need to be in place in order to be sustainable in the long run. So that was enough talking from my side. What I would like you to do now is you have all of those 8 topics here, and you've written down your ideas about the key elements of integrated care. I would like you now to take your Post-its and put them underneath the titles where you think they fit best. And then we'll see what we come up with. Okay? Look at what have you identified, and maybe also look at whether there are any gaps or not, and whether there's anything missing. So what is really nice to see is that there's a definite majority in the foco nas pessoas, in people-centered care. And I think, as I said, I think this really came through yesterday as well. You are very clear on working with your communities and with your neighborhoods. And it's really nice to see when we look at it. So you're basically, what you put on your Post-its here was very much what I've been talking about. So actually, I wouldn't have had to come here anyway. So we have here, for example, an integrated vision of humanity. We have here care, patient-centered care, empathy, quite a few times, linking up and confidence, trust, dedication. I really like that. Totalização, what's that in English? Oh, everything, so holistic. Holistic. Horizontal care. Social support, yeah. So it's really very much what we've been talking about. Seeing the whole person and his or her family and his or her neighborhood. Does any one of you want to add something to this, or maybe tell us about an experience why you think that people-centered care is so important? There anything that has not been mentioned that should go into this topic, into this key element? No? You're all happy? Or you're still too tired, it's still too early in the morning. You haven't had enough coffee yet. Okay, then let's look at the next one, which is community involvement. And here we have very much care networks, equality, participation of everyone, again, networking of caregivers, networking of care. What I would be interested here is, because it's very much the same thing. It's about networking and it's about participation of everyone, equality. But community involvement, Andy, that's a bit more than that, isn't it?
Absolutely. So community involvement, now we've seen some lovely examples of community involvement, and we've heard a lot yesterday. I'm just thinking about being at UBS Horto and hearing about all the lovely community involvement and the beautiful photographs of Sheila and team dressed up at the school last week. So beautiful community involvement from very young all the way through. So I'm just thinking there's a lot of other, how are you all involving your communities? It would be nice to hear just another example of community involvement from another area. Now, if you're going to be shy, I'll pick on you. Beware. So now I have to say I don't know everybody, so I do apologise, I'm not terribly sure where everybody is from. So I'll come to community involvement, what does it mean to you?
O envolvimento da comunidade é a comunidade participar integral em todas as ações que você realiza. É você dar a oportunidade dela participar, né, dela levar o conhecimento, de sanar as dúvidas que ela tem também, de uma maneira em que ela entenda que você está ali trabalhando por ela e para ela também. É abrir as portas mesmo para que ela possa participar.
Obrigada. When has that worked well for you?
Na verdade, eu sou enfermeiro e eu trabalhei numa OBS na parte assistencial. E dentro do programa de saúde da família, eu consegui realizar vários projetos junto com a comunidade e com as ACS. Um desses projetos que aconteceu inúmeras vezes foi o Consulta Coletiva, onde nós levávamos o convite para a comunidade, vim participar de um evento dentro da unidade e uma vez por mês acontecia esse projeto. E nós levávamos um profissional de saúde para que pudesse sanar a dúvida deles. Então, nós tivemos oftalmo, nutricionista, psicólogo, e todos eles vinham e participavam integralmente da ação, tirando as dúvidas, porque a dúvida de um muitas vezes era do outro, e com isso a gente conseguiu atingir o objetivo, que era fazer com que isso se tornasse uma coisa mensal dentro da unidade. Outro projeto também que foi feito foi nas escolas, que nós íamos para dentro da escola, eu e os agentes comunitários, e nós fazíamos o Criança Feliz. Nós levávamos os bonecos com músicas de artistas aqui do Brasil, que cantam músicas ensinando, nós ensinávamos as coreografias, fazíamos brincadeiras, fazíamos a promoção da higiene oral, higiene corporal, dos cuidados com os alimentos, eram os projetos que nós fazíamos também. Outros projetos que nós fazíamos também eram com o pessoal da melhor idade, que a gente ia nas casas de repouso para poder fazer atividade física, controle de exames, e eles tinham essa participação, porque eles recebiam um convite e vinham para participar.
Obrigada. Can I just have a show of hands? Does that sound familiar? Are you all... Is everybody doing something similar to that? Yep. Yep. Guys, hands up. You're all being very shy there. It's a bit like, yay! Brilliant. Can I just say that's absolutely fantastic?
Thank you very much. And that illustrates really what community involvement is about. It's about going out there and doing something together, not just networking. But importantly, it's also actually about this level playing field. We're not looking down to them. We're not telling them, this is what you got to do because I'm the nurse, I'm the doctor. We respect each other, and you have just as much knowledge, just as much skills as I have. So we're going to do this together. And very often, it still is very much hierarchical. So moving away from that and opening up to the possibilities and also letting the community run with it. Do something with it. That's really important. But that, of course, also means, as we said before, the workforce needs to have new and different competencies. And here I see a lot of it is about teamwork, multidisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, and again, humility and humanization of care, paying attention to what the individual needs, and complementing each other, linking up to each other, working in a team. How many of you are used or found it easy from the very beginning to work in a team? How many of you liked starting to work in a team? Okay, that's very honest. How many of you were doubtful? How many of you were not sure whether you liked actually changing your work and going out into a bigger teamwork? How many of you had doubts? We're not sure. Yeah, a few. How many of you were really scared? Also a few. So, as I say, it is difficult. We need to change. And we need to acknowledge that. Mandy, what do you think? What is your experience in that?
Absolutely, guys. It can be very difficult. How many times do you feel turning up to the new job, the new team, and it feels like the first day at school? And you're not very sure, and you're walking in, and you're doing the very, oh, hello. So that is something that can be very difficult. And sometimes when you're in that feeling, you can feel as if you're the only person. And that's where we'll come on later to talking about trust. You guys, when we were here in March, you spoke beautifully about speaking from the heart. You do that much better than we do at home. So it's being that very honest and about how you're actually feeling and sharing that with your team. It's so important taking the time to get to know each other, get to understand your roles, and building up that team as well.
As so often, under information and data, there's not a lot. And we expected that. That's why Peter and Andy and Anne will talk more about that later on. So I don't want to go into this in detail. Because it is difficult, it's something that we're not used to. And you need to learn also, how do we use data sensibly? How do we use it to plan and go forward in the future? So that's something that you will hear later on. Similarly, communication. Now, I'm a bit surprised that there's not that much here. But at least quite a few of you have identified communication as a key element, which is really important. As I said before, it's something that you really need to work on, and we need to be very conscious about our communication skills. And we will go a bit more into detail later on, so we will leave that. Then let's look at the care transitions and processes here. Interestingly, somebody put communication here, which is true. Yes. You need communication as part of this process. Do you want to explain a bit more what you meant by that?
Oi, bom dia. Meu nome é Yara, eu sou enfermeira da atenção básica e como ela acabou de dizer agora, que ela ficou surpresa porque na comunicação não foram colocados muitos post-its. Até porque eu acredito assim, que em transições e processos de cuidados, a comunicação é essencial. Várias outras coisas também são essenciais, mas a comunicação nesses processos de cuidados, se você não interagir com uma atenção integrada ali, você não vai conseguir os seus objetivos, os seus cuidados. Então, eu acho assim que tudo é uma engrenagem. Na saúde, na educação, no social, em todos os segmentos, é tudo uma coisa, é uma engrenagem. Se cada um fizer o seu papel, se cada um se colocar não só como uma coisa profissional, mas um sentimento ali de humanização, de empatia, de você resolver os problemas do seu paciente, da sua comunidade como um todo, a gente não vai chegar a nada. Não adianta, precisa ter comunicação entre as secretarias, entre os nossos governantes, entre as nossas hierarquias. E eu acho que isso ainda precisa... Eu acho que a gente está num caminho muito bom, um caminho que a gente consegue executar muitas coisas boas, mas eu acho que ainda precisa um pouquinho, principalmente dessa comunicação, desse feedback, sabe? Às vezes a gente faz as coisas, a gente não sabe que atingiu, porque a gente não tem feedback. Então, acho que precisa de um pouquinho mais. Mas a gente está no caminho certo. Acho que a gente vai conseguir.
Thanks a lot. And I think what is also really nice in this example is you see that they're all linked together. And that's why I said in the beginning, there's no real hierarchy here. I put them together randomly. And that's why there's so many different models. And some of them are in more detail, some of them are higher level. And you know the house of care that has been introduced as well. So sometimes you can rearrange them as well and say information and communication go together, or communication is actually part of competencies. But the major point here is they are all linked. They all support each other. And so if one piece is missing, the others won't flow as nicely and won't be sustainable. There's something else really interesting here. I like this. It says a common space for multidisciplinary integration. Hand up who wrote that down. I really like this. If I interpret it correctly. No, who said that? Don't be shy. I would just like to know why you said that.
Eu coloquei isso e até escrevi, são duas vias, né? Porque a interdisciplinaridade, para nós profissionais, é extremamente importante, já que é uma junção de saberes, e coloquei que é uma forma de atender todas as demandas. Não é algo único, né? A pessoa também ela tem várias facetas, tem várias coisas que envolvem esse processo. Então, é uma forma de atender como um todo. Isso é integral.
Thank you. And I think what is also part of this, and we haven't really talked about this yet, but it also means we need common space to be able to meet. We need to share spaces, and we need to have either a virtual room, we need to have the time, we need to also have the flexibility to be able to meet somewhere and gather in an interdisciplinary way across sectors and organizations. And very often, the buildings we are in and also the pathways we are on in our day-to-day business do not give us the space, whether it's time-wise or also as a room, to actually meet a colleague and just say, "Hi, Larissa, how are you doing? Did you follow up with Mrs. Bernardo?" So this is really important to acknowledge as well. You need to create this space to be able to work together. So very nice. We're moving on to, for me, it's the least interesting part, but I won't say that out loud. But of course you need that. So what do we have here under governance and accountability? We have impartial attention, which is really important. So impartiality, fairness, the same rules are here for everyone. Collaboration, again, integrated care and care for everyone. Paying attention, compromising, that's also a good one. So compromising that and acknowledging, and we heard that actually yesterday a lot, the different secretaries need to work together. Education, health, social development, elderly, infrastructure, they all need to be in this together, and reaching a political compromise is probably even more difficult than reaching a professional compromise about integrated care. Mandy, because Scotland has such a wide experience with governance and accountability, do you want to add something to that?
I think from the experience that we have in Scotland and from the governance, that has also been a journey for us as well, as to how we actually bring all of that together, whether it be the people, the infrastructure, and the information. I loved your point about integration being a pathway, and it's a path that we're on. And I think that, so all those elements are coming together around that. And the structures in Scotland have been put in place, but it is very much something that it is a journey that everybody is on as to how you bring the different elements together. So always keep remembering it is this journey and it is evolving.
Thank you. So finally, we arrive at the cultures and values. And quite a few actually have already been mentioned. We have a couple of times, again, empathy. It's, again, a compromise, equity, sharing values, changing also the limited values and beliefs that we have and creating those common values. Listening, and listening well, listening actively. That's actually really, I like that as a value. We usually use it as a skill, but it should be a value that you actually listen. And a holistic vision for what good health and well-being actually means. And I think this is really important. This is something that we need not only locally, we not only need it for ourselves, it's something that we need as a country and as a society as well. And we don't often discuss that. So I think that this really summarizes well everything that we need on our integrated care journey and all of those bits and pieces. The difficult question is, of course, how do they all fall into place? How do those different pieces fit into the puzzle? How do we put that together? And that's, of course, something that we cannot teach you and we cannot tell you. It's something that you need to figure out yourself, because that always depends on your context. It always depends on your community and your neighborhood. What is it that you have as a resource? What is it that you need to add? So what we can provide you with are ideas, thoughts, examples of what has worked somewhere else. We can give you the key elements, but how to actually put them into place and how to change your community, your own values, and those of your colleagues, that's unfortunately something that you have to figure out for yourselves. But we're happy to discuss with you and support you in that, on that journey and on that pathway. So any final thoughts or any comments, anything that has not been mentioned yet, what you think is really, really important, and something that has been missing out so far?
Bom dia, meu nome é Sheila. Eu só gostaria de complementar que eu vejo a questão de cultura e valor como o principal, o que vai influenciar todos os outros tópicos. Então, assim, desenvolver competências, você vai partir de uma cultura, de um valor. Desenvolver a habilidade de se comunicar vai partir também de culturas e valores. Então, eu acho que o nosso principal foco, antes de chegar nas pessoas, é a questão de culturas e valores, porque isso vai influenciar diretamente. Eu penso que é uma forma da gente começar a pensar também nessa questão.
Thanks a lot. That's a really nice point. Anything you want to add? Anything that's still missing? I think it's a really nice, actually, closure also for this discussion, your statement, because it is true that cultures and values underlie everything that we do. And what's really important here is also to acknowledge it's part also of something that we will be talking a bit more about, a learning environment. Cultures and values are learned. We observe our parents, our peers, our colleagues, and our seniors. How do they act? And how do they conduct themselves? And if I see someone snubbing a patient or not listening to a colleague, and I'm a junior coming in, I will follow that senior doctor or that senior nurse because I want to fit in, as Mandy said. So also being aware of the fact that each and every one of you is a peer, but you're also teachers and mentors to the younger colleagues, but also to your peer group. So if you want to change the cultures and values, if you want to change how people interact and how people work together, you need to set the example. That is something that we have not really looked into until very recently, because we assume it's intrinsic. And we cannot, I can't tell you now, I'm talking about empathy today, tomorrow you're gonna have empathy. That doesn't work. It needs to be inside yourself. And so I think being aware of the fact that you are always also a role model for others is really important. To step back, and as we heard, be humble, step back, and be respectful. So thank you very much. I think this was a really good session. Before we go into the coffee break, I just need to announce that after the coffee break, we're going to split into 2 groups. So one group will stay here with Mandy and myself, and we will talk more about creating this learning environment, about leadership and management competencies, and also about cultures and values and everything that comes with it. How do I make my colleagues understand? How do we change together? And the second group with Anne and Peter will go upstairs, and they will talk much more about what kind of data do we have, how can we use the data, how can we base decisions on data and information, and how can we get the information, actually, how do we collate it and act upon it. And because it's a smaller room, there's a maximum, I think, of 20 people. So first come, first serve. And by the end of the coffee break at 11, follow Anne and Peter upstairs. Okay? So thank you.